Hey, so today's podcast is presented by Podgo. Podgo is the easiest way for you to monetize your podcast, providing podcasters with a flat rate for ad space so you always know how much you get when you include an ad from Podgo. Apply today to become a member and immediately be connected with advertisers that fit your audience. That's podgo.co at podgo.co. And be sure to add our podcast in the How Did You Hear About Podgo section of the application. Hey y'all, welcome to a new episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast with your girl Stephanie Hardy. Thank you so much for listening to the show. If this is your first time listening, and if this isn't your first time listening, thank you for your continued support of my podcast. Please like, share, and subscribe everywhere you listen to this show, and just continue to tell people about, the chill, positive, and passionate gospel of my show. So in this show, I got your news and gossipish, and there's some stuff that I really do want to talk about in a very strong way. And then I have predictions and cases for the Royal Rumble, which is happening this Sunday. And I have your weekly recap of your favorite shows for Raw, NXT, and SmackDown. Or I may just talk about how the Rumble coincides this year with all three shows. Actually, they're not incorporating NXT in the show, but they may have surprise people show up at the Rumble, so you never know. But anyway, thank you, and listen and chill to this new episode of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. All right, so I got your news and gossipish here, and there's a lot that I'm going to discuss in a very strong way. So if I do come off very passionate or kind of angry, then, just deal with it, because your girl has a lot to say about a lot of stuff that's been going down. Last week I was sick. I lost my voice, but now I'm getting it back. So there's so much that I have to talk about. And the first thing is we want to send well wishes to Mia Yim, who revealed today that she tested positive for COVID-19. It was really sad. She won't be able to compete in the Royal Rumble on tomorrow night because she tested positive. She posted a screenshot of a note that she wrote on iPhone, and she said, "This morning around 10:30 a.m., I debunked a rumor stating I was positive with COVID. For that, I must make a statement. I have been getting tested every week for several months now. All have been negatives. I was negative last week. I got tested this afternoon less than an hour ago, and it came back positive. Please respect my privacy. Please stay safe, wash your hands, and wear a mask. See you all soon." I feel like this is kind of a tough break, considering she probably could have definitely benefited from performing in the Royal Rumble this Sunday, but safety first, and I really wish her the best. And it also makes me wonder if it's possible that maybe, since her and Keith Lee are in relationship with one another, if he'll even participate in the Rumble for the men, and he was definitely picked as a favorite to win out of the men's Royal Rumble. But I don't know if he's going to be participating or whatever, but he hasn't released a statement at this point. But I really hope that she recovers and, she doesn't get the worst of what COVID has done to people, definitely. And I hope that he isn't affected by it either, and that they're just taking care of each other and doing what's best for each other. She has yet to really find her groove, even though she is in the group. She's in the stable Retribution with Mustafa Ali as his leader. But I wish her the very best. Something else that also happened in the news this week that I found very interesting as a human interest story was MVP. He's been, tearing it up as the leader of the Hurt Business with Shelton Benjamin and Cedric Alexander as the Raw Tag Team Champions and Bobby Lashley as the United States Champion. But of course, they have some dissension going on here lately. But in an article, in an exclusive interview, that he had with Bleacher Report, he talked about some of his background, which I found very interesting. I found out he's 47 years old. I also found out that his real name is Hassan Hameen Assad, even though it didn't start off that way. And the reason why he changed his name was because he spent a lot of time behind bars, from the age of 16 to the age of 25. And in January 1990, he was, him and his friends robbed a cruise ship of more than $80,000. And because he got caught, him and his accomplices got caught, his father, who was a corrections officer, talked to him and told him to turn himself in, and he pleaded guilty to 10 counts of armed kidnapping and robbery and was sentenced to more than 18 years behind bars. So he started a new life after he got out of jail and changed his name to Hassan Assad, and he turned his energy towards pro wrestling. And this is where he, of course, became MVP, and he went on to have a modicum of a lot of success, during his first WWE reign. And then he left that company and went to Impact for a while, and then he came back. And now then he said in an interview that one of his greatest inspirations for coming back to WWE and having that moment that he had at the Royal Rumble, surprisingly last year, where he was dressed up as Black Panther, was because of his son. And he really wanted his son to see him, inside WWE action, and WWE was interested in keeping him on, and that's how he's on now as a producer and as a leader of the Hurt Business. So hearing his redemption story and figuring out what more of what makes MVP tick was very interesting to see, because growing up I always thought he was just some flashy black dude who just thought he was just some baller type, basketball baller type dude, and he was just wrestling or whatever. But it's always wonderful to see that there's more stories, to these wrestlers from a human perspective than meets the eye. And it makes me love MVP and respect him even more as a legend and an OG. And I would never diss anyone for any mistakes that they may have made, because we're all humans. We do whatever. Sometimes we do some crazy things in order to survive and in order to do things. And I'll never judge anyone. So I'm glad that he turned his life around and became a wrestler, and now we know him as the OG that he is now. So much respect to MVP. We love him here on the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. So there we go. Also, something interesting that's been rumbling about on the internet for like the past couple of days. It's just been The Undertaker and Goldberg and Devon Dudley and their comments about today's wrestlers and what the culture is like backstage now. Now, I don't know if you have heard or haven't heard, but it started with The Undertaker saying something on the Joe Rogan podcast where, the Joe Rogan Experience, where he said that the WWE product is kind of soft, and it kind of rubbed a lot of people the wrong way, a lot of the fans the wrong way, because he was sort of talking about, how apparently a lot of current wrestlers, play video games backstage, and they're all about, flashy stuff and looking pretty and all that other stuff, as opposed to being, I guess, really rugged men like they used to be back in the day or whatever. And that really did, rub people the wrong way. But then it got even worse. It kind of snowballed out of control once Goldberg had his interview with Vic Joseph and Corey Graves on the After the Bell podcast, where he agreed that, that the industry had changed. And this is what Goldberg said. He said, when you hear the comments about me coming back and doing 1 or 2 matches a year, how people are like, he doesn't deserve it. He never paid his dues. He was never on the road, and these guys are on the road, and he was saying that he feels like the business is soft, but the business is in 2021, so things have to change and things have to be different. And even though he said that things have to be different, it's just the idea that you agreed with the fact that the business is soft. And then Devon Dudley also came out and said that and basically said that he felt like a lot of today's wrestlers are rude and disrespectful to a lot of the legends and stuff. And also, to kind of go back to speak more on what Goldberg said, he said that, like I said, times are quite different than they were back then and today, but people are soft. People take offense to things way too quickly. Get a little thicker skin, boys and girls. That's all I can say. When Legends came in, when I was in the business in the beginning, I was greatly appreciative of the eyes they brought to our product. And one day those young kids are going to be just like me, and I hope that karma comes back to bite them in the A word. That's all I can say. Because at 54 years old, I don't know one of them that could be doing what I do. And I'm going to give my opinion on it. I am all for giving respect where respect is due, because I was raised, of course, by my mom and dad, and I was also partly raised by all of my grandparents. And they always taught me to respect my elders no matter what. That's just something that's been instilled in me since I was a child, and that's something that I still do, even to this day, even as I am an adult. I will say yes, sir, and no, sir, no, ma'am, and yes, ma'am, to any and everyone, do whatever I can to help elderly people, and show my love to them, because they did pave the way for me to be where I am. And that's something that'll never change. I respect and love, all of my elders. There's no disrespect there. And I definitely love my elders in wrestling, because there's a lot of stories that they can tell that can give all kinds of, advice for us, as we move forward and press along, in our lives, as wrestling podcasters, as wrestling interviewers, and of course, as wrestlers. But where I draw the line at is where you're an older wrestler and you feel like you are sort of obligated to a level of respect, and make it seem like they always have to respect you and basically bow down to you every time you come up to them, or every time they give you some advice or whatever. To be quite honest, it's almost like what Mustafa Ali said in that Raw talk. It's like, you guys did pave the way, and we can give you credit for paving the way for us, but when are you going to let us walk on that path that you paved? At what point are you going to take the spotlight off of yourself? And I may have said this before, but I'm going to say it again. At what point are you going to take the spotlight off of yourself and stop riding on the pride of what you used to do, and actually let these boys and girls who are here actually, make their own mark, and not just think you're just obligated to respect, because respect is a two-way street. We can't respect you if you don't respect us as adults too. And I think something that a lot of elders do have a tendency to do is the fact they have a tendency to be disrespectful towards younger people who are also adults, because they feel like they can, but yet they feel like they want all of the respect. They want all the respect because they're older. But at the same time, you don't want to give us any respect, from the experiences that we've had, and make it seem like our experiences are just as valid as your experiences. And I think that type of thinking kind of turns people off from wanting to continue to support you as an older wrestler, because you think everybody is obligated to probably bow down to you or kiss your butt or whatever. And that's just kind of toxic. That's really toxic, because it's just, you can't just expect respect when you don't give it. And I'm not saying that these people don't give respect to these wrestlers of the present, on a regular everyday basis. But at the same time, you can't just expect all these people to just respect you based off of what you did. That's great. You did all these amazing things to pave the way for these people, but you can't also expect them to just run up behind you and treat you like you're gods, because you're not. You're humans. So as much as I love The Undertaker for everything he's done, for character wrestling and kayfabe wrestling, and as much as I love Goldberg for everything he's done for his power stuff in WCW, and how it contributed to WCW being as dominant as it was during the 90s, and as much as I love Devon Dudley for everything he did, for tag team wrestling, I don't take too kindly to them talking about how wrestling is soft now, because a lot of these people who are wrestling in WWE and in other promotions now came through the indies first. And even if they didn't come through the indies, they trained hard and worked hard to become what they've become now. And yes, they do have to focus on character. And yes, some of them may focus on their faces and all that other stuff. But some of these people have interests outside of wrestling that require them to focus on other things. Like The Miz, for an example, when during his character run, like say maybe in the 2010s, where he was talking about his face being a money maker, he's also an actor and he's also a TV star. So there's a level to keeping himself, pretty that I guess he has to do because he's marketable, in other areas of his, career outside of wrestling. And then you also have people like Xavier Woods who've created a platform, with his video game channel Up Up Down Down, which brings a lot of other eyes to wrestling that might have not otherwise paid attention to wrestling before. And of course, now he's going to be a host on G4 now that it's been rebooted. There's a level to it there's a level to wrestling that is different now. Some of these people have other interests outside of wrestling. Like maybe if one day they retire, they have other interests outside of wrestling. And it's just like, you can't just fault them for, being how they are now by being image conscious or possibly using other platforms to do things and play video games and stuff like that. Because for some people, playing video games is good for their mental health and it keeps them sane where all this crazy stuff is going on. And I feel like with everything that's happening with COVID and all the random things that happen in life and all of the above, like, you need to let people do what they need to do in order to stay comfortable and to keep their heads in the game and not just trash them for it just because it's not how it used to be when you were young. Like, stop it. It can't be like that. That was in the 90s and the 80s. This is 2021. Like, chill out. Like, chill out and hush. I mean, give advice where it is warranted, but don't just shoot off at the mouth just because you think you can. Like, stop and it, because it just makes you look bitter at this point. It just makes you look bitter and it makes you look sad. And that's really all I have to say about that. So, yeah, just let these young wrestlers live their best lives and just let them do what they're going to do because they're training hard, they're working hard, they're taking bumps, they're getting injured. They're dealing with a whole lot of other stuff that you probably didn't think to deal with or stuff that you weren't exposed to, way back when. So give them some grace and hush. And that's really all I have to say for this news and gossipers segment. And now we're going to go to Royal Rumble predictions and cases. Okay, so I was sitting with my friends one day and they asked me, Stephanie, how do you record your podcast? And I said, with the Anchor app on my phone. And they were like, are you serious? I'm like, yeah, it's that simple. It is absolutely free. There are creation tools that allow you to record and edit your podcast right from your phone and your computer. And it will distribute your podcast for you so it can be heard on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and many more. You can also make money from the podcast with no minimum listenership. And it's got everything you need to make a podcast in one place. They even have classes and stuff that you can listen to that will give you all kinds of good tips on what you need to do in order to make the best podcast. So if you want to do this, download the free Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to get started. That's anchor.fm or download the free Anchor app to get started. Okay, so here's where I'm going to talk about the Royal Rumble this year and the cases for people winning the two men and women's Royal Rumble matches and the predictions of the matches, of the rest of the matches going forward for the rest of the pay-per-view. So, of course, as always, I'm going to start with the women. So, with the women, we have the match between, we have a couple of matches. We have Sasha Banks, the GOAT, versus Carmella for the SmackDown Women's title. Now, they've been kind of going back and forth, at each other ever since, Carmella started attacking her after Sasha won the SmackDown Women's title from Bayley. And they've been fighting each other back and forth. And you got Reginald in there, being his flippy, Somali self. And just last week, Sasha Banks kicked his ever-loving behind, and it was wonderful, and I loved it. But he was also really impressive as well because of all his flips and stuff. And I found out on Instagram that he actually used to work for Cirque du Soleil, so he's basically a circus guy. So I think that's really cool. But he also tried to offer Sasha Banks some wine on SmackDown last night too, but she turned it down and basically said that she's gonna break Carmella's jaw on Sunday. So to be quite honest, with them going back and forth at each other constantly, I don't see, as much as I love Carmella, I don't see her winning against Sasha Banks at this point, because heading into WrestleMania, you have and with their Royal Rumble match, you have the possibility of whoever wins the Royal Rumble Sunday going up against, any women's champion. That's Asuka, that's Sasha Banks, or maybe even Io Shirai, maybe, when it comes to NXT. I'm not sure if they're going to include that in the deal, but, it was included last year, so maybe it's safe to assume that they will. But they have the choice. And I can't imagine, even though there's a draw that Carmella does have, it's not as strong as Sasha Banks' draw right now. So I see Sasha Banks, retaining the title, even though Carmella's going to put up a great fight. And then, of course, she always has the X factor of Reginald there. I see Sasha Banks winning and her going on to face possibly whoever wins the women's Royal Rumble match. And then in terms of the women, we also have the women's tag team championship match between Asuka and Charlotte, who are the champions, versus Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax. Now, this has been going on Raw, and I feel like it's been kind of awkward because the way that they've been booking Charlotte and Asuka, they've had them separate from each other most of the time, with the exception of 2 SmackDowns ago where they fought, to retain their tag titles against the Riot Squad. And this was really interesting, but at the same time, on Raw, it's like they're never together, because Charlotte also has this feud going on with Lacey Evans, because Lacey Evans is currently trying to woo Ric Flair away from her. And it's really interesting how you have these 2 tag team champions who have these separate things going on. And then you have Asuka as the Raw Women's Champion as well, fighting Alexa Bliss, who also has this feud going back and forth with Randy Orton on behalf of the Fiend Bray Wyatt. And this past Monday, Asuka and Alexa Bliss had the main event where they fought for the Raw Women's Championship, and Alexa Bliss wound up, even though she almost wound up winning, she wound up losing because Randy Orton came out there and RKO'd her with his disfigured face. And the tag team titles have just been kind of taking the back seat to all of that. And it's been kind of disorganized, and for the life of me, I don't understand how is it that they're also planting seeds of dissension inside of Shayna Baszler and Nia Jax to possibly break up, but yet and still they still want to go after the tag team titles. And even though they started off in a tag team not liking each other to begin with, they still, had the ability to work together. And even though that makes sense, it's at the same time it doesn't make sense, because they've both declared themselves to possibly be in the Royal Rumble as well. So either you want to be solo or either you don't want to be solo. Like, you can't have it both ways. Make up your mind. And I would just prefer for the both of them at this stage, to just separate, because I believe Shayna Baszler deserves to have a little bit of a solo run towards the Raw Women's Championship, so she can sort of beef back up her little momentum that she had last year, but then it just got deflated because she lost the Royal Rumble and then she lost her match against Becky Lynch. There's just more that Shayna Baszler could be doing at this point, other than tagging with Nia Jax, who's just somehow, she's just, I don't know. I'm kind of on the outs with Nia Jax at this point, because I don't know if she means to hurt people or not at this stage, so it's just kind of like, I don't know. Like, I just need for the women's tag team titles to actually have some meaning and to actually have some teams to actually go after it. And for them to actually book it in a way that makes sense, because that's been one of the weird parts of Raw that just don't make sense to me. So I predict that Asuka and Charlotte might retain, That is, unless, of course, Lacey Evans goes out there to try to ruin Charlotte and take her focus off the game, and then Nia Jackson, Shayna Baszler retain. Well, not retain, but win the titles again. But I really don't see Asuka and Charlotte losing at this point because they just won them. So I'm going to predict that Asuka and Charlotte are going to retain their tag titles, and Nia and Shayna are going to break up. Or they're going to eliminate each other and officially break up in the Women's Royal Rumble match. So, hey, whatever. And when it comes to the Women's Royal Rumble match, I'm trying to decide really who could, surprisingly show up and be a surprise entrant. Of course, you have all of your legends and stuff who could very well come back and be a surprise entrant. You have your Jacquelines, you have your Molly Hollies, you have your Trish Stratuses, your Litas. You have all of those amazing people. You even have Melina at this point who could come back and, be in the match or whatever. And then you also have people from NXT who could come in the match as well, like Shotzi Blackheart, like Rhea Ripley, who hasn't been on NXT television since she lost her last woman standing match against Raquel Gonzalez. I have a huge feeling that she might show up and make some mad waves. But the person that I am predicting to possibly win this Women's Royal Rumble match is Bianca Belair. I literally don't see anybody else winning. I don't see anybody else with all the momentum, with all of the hoopla behind them other than her. I mean, because the baby girl has been on a roll. I love her so much. She has been on an absolute roll. Her WWE Chronicle just came out where we learned that she dealt with depression and with eating disorders when she was an athlete in high school and also in college. Like, she dealt with a lot of things that sort of, kept her down until she found CrossFit. And then through CrossFit, she wound up gaining the attention of Mark Henry, who said she should come to WWE. And now she is a homegrown star. And now, in her first year on the main roster, she has made such a huge splash. Like, I don't see anyone else truly coming in and winning this match other than her. Because if she wins and she faces Sasha Banks for the SmackDown Women's title, you have money there. You have Sasha Banks, who is arguably the GOAT and could put on a great match with a broomstick. And then you have all of her star power, with everything she's brought, within the past year with the tag team that she had with Bayley and the feud she had with Bayley. And then with her being on Star Wars, The Mandalorian, and everything she's done. And then you also have Bianca Belair with everything she's done. And even with her being in a Truth commercial for smoking and all that other stuff and vaping. Like, it would just be amazing to watch these two, wrestle each other. And on a personal note, it would mean the world to me because you've also, I don't know if this has ever truly happened in terms of history. You would have these two black women facing each other for a mainstream wrestling title. And I'm not sure if that's ever happened before, but that would be historic. And for someone like Bianca Belair, who wears her pride in her heritage on her sleeve, and with Sasha Banks, who is, the cousin of Snoop Dogg, who also, wears her heritage on her sleeve, it would just mean the world to me on a personal level if these two black women were able to show their best selves in this match. And quite frankly, at WrestleMania, I wouldn't even know who to root for. I would just sit and watch that match and just see what outcome would happen and just be happy either way that it happened. So I am predicting for Bianca Belair to win the entire thing, and I'm not going to be a negative person and feel some type of way about her, beating Bayley this past SmackDown, and and then with Bayley sort of staring at her in this evil way, after she lost the match and everything. I'm just going to be positive and just, manifest that the EST of WWE is going to be the EST of the Royal Rumble and be the EST of Mania. So yeah, I'm predicting Bianca Belair. There's literally no one else in my mind that could win it. That is it. That is all. And that's it. So that's really all for the women side of the Royal Rumble pay-per-view. Now, in terms of the men's side of the pay-per-view, you have Roman Reigns versus Kevin Owens in a last man standing match. this feud has been absolutely entertaining, and they took it up to another level on this past SmackDown because they had a face-to-face, but not really a face-to-face because, COVID and stuff, where they talked at each other, and Roman Reigns just took like the worst digs at Kevin Owens' family and was throwing mad shade at his bloodline and his grandparents and all that other stuff, and Kevin Owens just wasn't having it. So I'm predicting that we're going to see a whole nother level of intensity from Kevin Owens, but ultimately he's not going to win because Roman Reigns is Roman Reigns and he's the tribal chief and the head of the table. So Roman Reigns is definitely going to win, but I'm going to predict that Kevin Owens is going to lock into another savage level of him that we've also never seen. And also for the men's side, we have Drew McIntyre versus Goldberg for the WWE Championship. And even though they work together with their whole spear and Claymore kick spot on The Miz and John Morrison this past Monday, and how cool that was, if Goldberg wins, I'll be pissed. And I'm just going to say that. I'll be very angry if Goldberg wins this match, because here again, you'll have WWE depending on nostalgia for the sake of WrestleMania, as opposed to depending on their champion who's been carrying the company on his back since the pandemic era started. And I just don't need that to happen. And especially since Goldberg said all that stuff he said about people not showing them, respect and all this other stuff when Drew McIntyre has done nothing but show respect to the people who came before him. It literally makes no sense. So I'm just kind of done with Goldberg at this point. A part of my childhood would always love him for the joy he brought me when I was a child, but I'm no longer a child. I've put away childish things, and I am a grown woman. And grown woman Stephanie is tired. Grown woman Stephanie is tired of Goldberg just popping up and just skipping the line and getting titles. And getting titles and title shots. I'm tired of it. So I'm predicting that Drew McIntyre is going to win. Drew has to win at this point, because if he loses after he just kind of got it back from Randy Orton and has to toss his belt, that he's been carrying the company with all this time to somebody who isn't going to be on television as much until it's time for WrestleMania in April, then that would have just been a waste of my time and everybody else's time. So yeah. Also with the men, really, I'm not even sure if they've announced an IC title match with Big E and someone. He has a lot of people he would fight with at this point, so I'm not sure if he has a match, and I'm not necessarily sure if he's going to be participating in the Royal Rumble. I hope he is, because he was definitely one of my favorites to win, and I think I'm going to go to the men's Royal Rumble match simply because of the fact that I have so many favorites to win in the men's match that I'm just going to talk about them all. And I have probably about like a top 5 or 6 people who I would be happy with if they won. If I see the case for a lot of men here winning, I see the case for Mustafa Ali winning the Royal Rumble, because he has a chip on his shoulder that's huge, and it's a chip that's lasted for 2 years now, and it's absolutely intriguing to see him sort of go from being this sweet guy to being the guy who was backstage, watching everybody on camera, to the leader of Retribution. And now you see him attacking Xavier Woods constantly because he has a beef with Kofi Kingston for taking away his opportunity that he probably would have had at WrestleMania 2 years ago. But Kofi took his place, and then Kofi Mania happened, and I have no regrets about that because it was amazing, and I've talked about it too many times on this show, so I'm not going into it right now. But Mustafa has a giant chip on his shoulder, and he has something to prove. And what was funny about Raw was the fact that when he was attacking and beating up on Xavier, he said that, since Kofi Kingston can't participate in the Rumble this year, I'm going to take his place, which was basically, circling back to how Kofi took his place at the Elimination Chamber 2 years ago, which led to him going on the Kofi Mania run. And I thought that was really smart storytelling on their part. So if Mustafa won the Men's Royal Rumble, I would not be angry at that at all, because that would feed into him getting an opportunity at a title that he should have had an opportunity at a long time ago. And that would be really, really cool. And then if he were to win the title, then you'd have Kofi trying to get it back again, because he hasn't really had another title run since he lost to Brock Lesnar. So that would be really cool too. So there's the case for Mustafa Ali. Then there's also a case for Cesaro. Cesaro has never won a Royal Rumble at all. And he has had so much momentum and he has so much athleticism to offer. Like, he's one of the best ring generals that WWE has had in the past 10 years. And he would definitely deserve a championship run, if anybody would deserve one. Because he's had other championships, but he's never really had a chance to go after the big one. And I would love if he had an opportunity. And he's been sort of getting beefed up and pushed a little bit on SmackDown as well. So I would love for him to get an opportunity too. Then there's also the case, of course, for Daniel Bryan, who has also never won a Royal Rumble. And when it came to him being and having a Royal Rumble moment, the one thing that people remember is, of course, Philadelphia, where he got in the match but then got eliminated, and Roman Reigns won, and everybody booed him out of the building, even if The Rock came out there and, raised his hand and all the other stuff. Nobody cared, because they wanted Daniel Bryan to be the guy. So if he had a chance to win the Royal Rumble, I wouldn't be mad at that either entirely. But the thing about him is that he's had title opportunity after title opportunity without having to win the Rumble. So I think that would be my only gripe against it, but I wouldn't mind him either. Now, I'm also going to make the case for Shinsuke Nakamura, even though he has also won a Royal Rumble, even though, he wound up not, winning the title from AJ Styles at the time he won it. If he won the Royal Rumble, I would be really excited about that, because he'd be a 2-time winner, and there are only so few people who won it, more than once. So if he was one of those people to win it another time, that would be really cool too. And he's been sort of getting a push. They've given him his old music back. It's possible that him and maybe Cesaro might be breaking up, because he's turned face. So I don't know. We'll see. But I think Shinsuke would have a good case for winning as well. Now, the two people who I would want to win it the most, though, is definitely Keith Lee and Big E. And yes, a part of it is the fact that they're both black men. But there's the point for Keith Lee is the fact that he had a championship opportunity against Drew McIntyre, and he proved without a shadow of a doubt that he could stand toe to toe with that man and take him to the absolute limit. And they had one of the best matches that's been on Raw in the past couple of months, and Raw's been on the struggle bus, right? But here's the thing. If Keith Lee were to win it, he would have an opportunity against Drew McIntyre, or possibly Goldberg again. And, well, not Goldberg again, but just Goldberg. And they could fight each other, and it would be amazing. But there's the case for Big E too. He has been on a singles run ever since they split up the New Day on 2 different shows. And we've sort of been seeing him face these, amazing, pillars in the WWE like Sheamus. And he's been having a great program with Apollo Crews, who has been getting like this devilish advice from Roman Reigns. And Apollo Crews has been trying to win the Intercontinental Championship from him. And then you also have Sami Zayn trying to win the championship from him as well. But I find that him against Apollo, who's been, moonlighting with Roman Reigns, more intriguing, because in that case, he would have a beef with Roman possibly out of, that happening. So Big E, if he won the Royal Rumble, I would be ecstatic for him. And he would have a run that's almost similar to Kofi's. And if he won, the WWE Championship or the Universal Championship, then that would be absolutely fantastic for him. And he would definitely deserve it, considering he's never had a chance at a main title, at a big title like that, either. And so those are really all the people who I have in mind to win that men's Royal Rumble match. But, you never know what could happen, and you never know what type of surprises might pop up. So all we can do is watch, tomorrow night and see what happens. So that's really all I have for Royal Rumble cases and predictions. And now we're going to go to our recap. Okay, so normally this is where I would do my weekly recap of all the shows for Raw, NXT, and SmackDown. But I decided not to do it this time because there's a lot of other stuff that I want to talk about in terms of housekeeping for my show, or announcements basically that's coming up. So, next week is going to be close to the anniversary of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Woo! Yeah, I've been doing this show a year. So to celebrate, I'm probably just going to release an episode sort of talking about my journey, about, how this started, more about how it started, other stories, to tell about my other experiences since I've started, and what my hopes are for the podcast going forward. And I'm just really excited, because when I started the show, it was after the Royal Rumble last year, and so much was going on. There was so many stories that were popping off, in wrestling, and there was still so much that I didn't know about, wrestling from outside of WWE, but I just knew there was something that I wanted to talk about and say. So that's what made me start the show. And I have learned so much and done so much, and I want to be able to talk about that. So in this next episode next week, I'm probably going to discuss that a whole lot more, from where I came from, and, how far I've gotten and how much further I hope that I can go. So the anniversary is actually February the 8th of 2021. And, that's also the day I start a new job too. So there's a lot going on in my life. My life is constantly in flux, but I think that's just the life of a millennial anyway. So that's what's going on with me. So like I said, the anniversary is February the 8th. So if you have any well wishes you want to give, or any questions you want to ask me about wrestling, or ask me about, how I started or why I started, and all of the above, and any ideas you want to give for my show and where it could go from here, please do that. I'm going to talk about where you can follow me after I give all of my announcements. Also next month, since it is Black History Month, and I am a Black female podcast host in wrestling, I'm going to be holding interviews with 3 of my closest heroes that I hold to my heart in terms of wrestling podcasting. I'm going to be interviewing them for the first 3 weeks of February. I'm going to be interviewing them. The first interview is going to be Janelle from the HR from the Jobber Tears podcast. And actually all of them are the co-hosts of the Jobber Tears podcast. In the second week, I'm going to be interviewing Mr. Black from the Jobber Tears podcast. And in the third week, I'm going to be interviewing Sir Wilkins of JTP. And I'm really happy to be interviewing them because they are just 3 of the most greatest and funniest people I've ever met in terms of this podcasting game. And if you want to listen to more, Black content creators in terms of wrestling, I would definitely say please listen to them, because they are brash, they're honest, they're going to tell it like it is. And even if their feelings are unpopular, they have no issues saying that. And they've been very supportive of me, during my journey since we've connected. And I'm so happy to talk to each of them, and get their perspective on all things wrestling, and how they started, and, how they got together, and what made them, become this collective unit as we know them today. And they also have a podcasting network of other podcasts as well. So they're really growing into this giant conglomerate of other podcasts, and that's really cool to see too. So I'm going to be talking with them next month. And then, of course, I have other interviews I'm setting up, consistently, getting in contact with more and more people inside of wrestling and also outside of wrestling, too, who are fans, So I'm really excited for what's coming up for this show. And I just wanted to at least announce that. I also wanted to announce that I am effective immediately no longer selling my Chill, Positive, and Passionate t-shirts. because I had a person who wanted to purchase a shirt but did not have Cash App. So what I'm going to try and do is possibly set up a wrestling t-shirt account with Pro Wrestling Tees, so I can actually design the shirts, myself, and you can go online and purchase them, like that. And so, once I set that up, I'll be advertising that on all my social media outlets pretty soon. So that's a thing that's going to happen as well. So I just wanted to let you guys know what's going to be up for the next month. And also for Black History Month, I'm probably going to talk about, African and African American wrestlers who have inspired me and sort of inspired the sport of wrestling from the past and also the present, and of course its future as well. And I'm probably going to highlight some more of the wrestlers that I've actually interviewed so far, and talk about them more as well in terms of Black history on my social media pages as well. So February is going to be a cool month. It's the anniversary month. It's Black History Month. There's so much going on. But I hope you could just, stick along with me for the ride. So to conclude this show, I'm just going to tell you where you can find me. You can follow me on Instagram at Hardy Wrestling Podcast. You can also follow on Instagram. You can follow me on Twitter at Hardy WrestlePod. And you can listen to the podcast on YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and you can also listen to it on the Anchor app for free, and that's also where you can, create your own podcast as well. So, if you want to just continue to support me, you can listen to me on YouTube with my YouTube channel, Hardy Wrestling Podcast, and please like, share, and subscribe that as well. And I'm hoping you're living your best lives and continuing to stay safe as we navigate this crazy girl called Rona. And, just hope for the best, as we push through our daily lives or whatever. So I hope you're being the light in the world, and I hope you're being chill, positive, and passionate in your own daily lives. And also as you're watching wrestling as well. So until next time, I hope you enjoy the Royal Rumble. It's got a lot of cool stuff going on this Sunday, and of course Bad Bunny is performing, which sort of feeds my point as to why rap and wrestling can indeed work. So I hope you do enjoy that as well, and just continue to enjoy everything that wrestling has to give. So until next time, this is Stephanie Hardy of the Hardy Wrestling Podcast. Bye, y'all.